Looking at the rest of the card, as far as results go, in the first fight on the Fox event or on the Fox card, Renato Moicano defeated Jeremy Stevens by split decision. This was a bit of a surprise with Stevens being a top five guy at featherweight and Moicano making his debut. Wasn't the most exciting fight. Moicano fought on the outside a lot. He was circling around a lot, picking his shots. Stevens was having trouble landing his shots, having trouble pinning him up against the fence, really being able to do a whole lot to him. And Renato was even able to land a couple takedowns there too. Big win for him, obviously. I think you winning over a top five guy in your debut, you're obviously going to be looking at another top guy in his next fight. I think the fact that the fight wasn't as exciting as a lot of fans would have liked is going to limit Renato's options as far as who he's going to fight. I think if he wins this fight a lot more impressively, he probably gets a top 10 guy guaranteed. Since it wasn't a terribly exciting fight, maybe they give him a guy who's in the 11 to 15 range, or maybe even someone who's just outside of that. But still, big win for him. For Jeremy Stevens, he was a guy who was slowly inching his way towards the title shot. He even got himself to a point where he was fighting Frankie Edgar in a fight where if he gets the win, arguably that puts him in the title picture, in a position for a title shot. If not, it probably puts him against a guy like Max Holloway next. And at that point, obviously Holloway's now the interim champ, but at that point you're looking really good and you're looking at a belt. Now he's had a couple losses. He's starting to kind of fall into a bit of a no man's land type of situation for him. I don't know that even before this fight happened that you would have ever expected him to get to the belt, but with a loss like this to an unranked guy, even if Moicano shows to be the real deal, it's just another guy that's going to end up being in front of him in line, and that's not going to be good for Stevens. So hopefully for Stevens' case, if he's still looking to work his way into the title picture, and he's a really tough guy to deal with, hopefully he's able to get a good win in his next fight. But I feel like if you're booking Stevens at this point, you're trying to book more for exciting fights than you are for title eliminators. So I don't know what Doo Ho Choi's up to, but if you could just imagine those two going at it, that would be one hell of a fight. The Cub Swanson one was good enough. You don't want to destroy too many of Doo Ho Choi's brain cells, but as fans, we'd love to see that fight happen. The last fight on the Fox prelims, which it was kind of weird. They aired the Fox prelims and then they aired the Fox card, so it was all on the same channel, but technically it was different programs. But the main event on that was a former Bellator champion, Alexander Volkov, defeating Roy Nelson by unanimous decision, 30-27 in all of them. Pretty clearly outstruck him throughout that fight. Used his length really well, was able to keep Nelson away from him at bay, was able to avoid the right hand, and that was enough to get him a victory, and it's a big one for him. Nelson, who's now outside of the top 15, you were hoping for his sake that he'd get a win here and kind of push himself back in, but this is only pushing him further down the rankings, and you wonder how long he's going to be able to stick around. He's a fan favorite, so you don't think the UFC... I wouldn't imagine the UFC is in any rush to cut him, but for him to be a guy who's always kind of been hovering on the top 10, and just when he gets his chance to work his way into the top 5, he'd lose, then he'd kind of fall back to the top 10, and kind of prove he's still a top 10 guy, and then work his way back in, fall. Now it's gone from he was working his way up, fell back, but now that fall has gone from falling right around the top 10 to top 12 area to falling outside the top 15, and now we're looking around the 20 area. So you wonder if Nelson's got another surge left in him, or if we've seen his best days at this point. Fight before that was a very highly touted prospect out of France, Tom Duquesnoy versus Patrick Williams. Duquesnoy, I've had a chance to look at some of his highlights from Bama. Very exciting fighter. His striking is obviously where he's at his best. Really good leg kicks, really good elbows. His grappling, he's a very competent grappler. He's very positionally aware. It doesn't seem like he's the most technical guy, but he's definitely pretty good about understanding how to keep good hip control. And if he's got a guy hurt, he can definitely finish him on the ground. And he's had some really good submissions, whether it's been triangles, rear naked choke, so be it. But this fight started off with him having some trouble with Williams, but after just kind of settling in a bit, he just lit Williams up. At the end of the first round, it looked as though he probably could have been awarded a finish. They didn't. They let it go to a second round, and less than 30 seconds into the next round, he was able to finish Williams with his elbows, and it was pretty brutal. Great start for Duquesnoy, and he's one of those guys where it'll be interesting to see how quickly they bring him along. If he tries to go the Conor McGregor route and just kind of call out guys that are well above him and work his way up, or whether he just kind of lets the UFC pick and choose who he's going to fight and slowly builds his way towards the top. But great prospect at a lower weight. The next fight was Rashid Magomedov defeating Bobby Green by split decision. Bobby Green's a guy who was hanging around the top 10 at lightweight and then ended up missing a lot of time. I think there were some personal issues, but also I think there were injury issues as well. I believe he had like a win over Josh Thompson at a time when Thompson was a top 10 guy. So he's a guy who's got a lot of upside, but it seems as though there have been a lot of personal issues there that have kind of halted his ability to train and continue to improve. Magomedov's no easy guy to deal with on his own right, and for this to be a split decision with Magomedov being the guy who, if he's not in the top 15 now, I mean, he should be where his skill set's at. That shows that Bobby Green's still tough. He can still hang with some of the best guys, but Magomedov was a little bit too much for him, and he got the victory there. Fight of the night was Tim Elliott defeating Louis Smolka by unanimous decision. Smolka's now on a 3-fight losing streak. Prior to that, when he was fighting Brandon Moreno, there was talk of him potentially being the next guy to fight Mighty Mouse. But since then, Smolka's a very good grappler, but he's not exactly the most athletic grappler. And some of these guys who are quicker, really good wrestlers, really, really good control on top, they've been giving him a lot of problems, and Elliott was just more of the same. He wasn't fighting the same way that Ray Borg fought him, but was able to secure takedowns pretty much at will. Really good at using his chokes, both to kind of use them for sweeps, but also to keep Smolka from getting too good of a position on him. Was able to pass Smolka's guard. There was a time where Smolka had what appeared to be a pretty good Darce choke. I believe it was in the 3rd round, but wasn't able to finish on him. Granted, beating a guy with his own move isn't exactly the easiest thing to do. A lot of times when you're training jiu-jitsu, if you get triangled a lot, the common thought would be ask what are good ways to defend the triangle, but the real way to learn how to defend a triangle is learn how to attack a triangle. Because you can ask someone how do you defend a triangle, they might tell you something that pops up in the back of their head, but when you actually learn how to attack a triangle, you see as the attacker what types of things can keep you from finishing, and you see what people are actually doing when they're actually presented with those submissions being used against them to defend it. So someone who's very good at a submission is generally going to be very good at defending that submission, and that seemed to be the case with Elliott too. He's pretty calm and composed and got out of it and was able to win 30-27 on all of the scorecards. On Fight Pass, in what was a bit of a surprising, not necessarily surprising that Aljamain Sterling won, but how he won. He beat Augusto Tonquinho Mendes by unanimous decision, 29-28 on all 3 scorecards. What was interesting to me about this fight is I figured that Sterling would not grapple with Mendes, given that Mendes is a world champion, and he would just kind of try to use his striking, use his range, and work from there. Tonquinho was able to knock him down in the 1st round, and presumably that's the round that he won on the judges' scorecards, but after that, Aljamain had no issue taking him down, and granted he was careful when he got down. He definitely had to fight off some submission attempts, but he definitely held his own against a guy who is arguably the best in the world at that weight in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So very impressive win for Aljamain Sterling. It was not an easy matchup. The name might not be the biggest to hardcore MMA fans, or just to casual MMA fans, but that, not only the fact that Aljamain won, but the way he won was incredibly impressive, and I think it really cements that he is a top 10 guy still. Devin Clark fought Jake Collier. He beat him by unanimous decision. Anthony Smith came back against Andrew Sanchez. Through what appeared to be intended as a head kick, but it landed with a knee, was able to finish Sanchez up against the fence after that with some punches. Zach Cummings choked out Nathan Coy with a guillotine choke. It took the ref a little bit of extra time to stop that fight. Coy was out for a few seconds before the ref realized it, but for a few seconds, usually you're not going to be suffering too much damage, but you still don't want to see a guy being choked any longer than he needs to be. And Ketlin Vieira defeated Ashley Evans Smith by unanimous decision.